just at this moment, we are confronted with the extraordinary story of a CIA guerrilla manual.
An organization that will always go around shooting itself in the foot because it deals with activists who are trained to break the law.
Yet just at this moment, we are confronted with the extraordinary story of a CIA guerrilla manual for the anti-Sandinista Contras, whom we are backing,
who have activist instincts, and they will always be getting themselves in trouble.
Yet just at this moment, we are confronted with the extraordinary story of a CIA guerrilla manual for the anti-Sandinista Contras, whom we are backing, which advocates not only assassinations of Sandinistas.
And what we're really seeing now are gross blunders and gross missteps, and in one case where two agents went so far afoul of propriety in the law that it did erupt into the public view.
Yet just at this moment, we are confronted with the extraordinary story of a CIA guerrilla manual for the anti-Sandinista Contras, whom we are backing, which advocates not only assassinations of Sandinistas, but the hiring of criminals.
Turple and Wilson, who were covered on 60 Minutes and a PBS documentary.
Those are the ones who were helping Libya, right?
Incredible, if you can believe it. Look at the way our president is dealing with the Libyan problem and Gaddafi. Our country's so concerned with the terrorism.
Yet just at this moment, we are confronted with the extraordinary story of a CIA guerrilla manual for the anti-Sandinista Contras, whom we are backing, which advocates not only assassinations of Sandinistas, but the hiring of criminals to assassinate the guerrillas we are supporting.
The hitman team that was supposed to be tracking our president down to kill him, and now we find that two fairly senior CIA officers were out actually training. They had resigned from the CIA, but they were being supported by people who were at the very top of the CIA.
Yet just at this moment, we are confronted with the extraordinary story of a CIA guerrilla manual for the anti-Sandinista Contras, whom we are backing.
Voting to pump up the money for the freedom fighters,
which advocates not only assassinations of Sandinistas, but the hiring of criminals.
Good evening. BCCI, it's a shadowy international bank linked to terrorists, drug runners, and dictators. The bank is closed now, but it had operated in some 62 countries, and its legacy is shaking world capitals. The bank's shady dealings were first exposed on this program almost 3 years ago by the investigative team of Brian Ross and producer Ira Silverman. Brian is with us now from Atlanta. Brian, how can one bank cause so much trouble in so many countries?
Well, Faith, the collapse of BCCI has confirmed what many investigators suspected for several years, that this bank was, without a doubt, the world's dirtiest bank, and that wherever it went, its way of doing business was corruption, deceit, and fraud. Now, with almost $5 billion missing, the BCCI scandal
to assassinate the guerrillas we are supporting.
We've got 300 in the field. Yeah. Yep.
In order to create martyrs.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
لواء العرضيات. لواء العرضيات. استهداف دبابة لقوات النظام.
الله أكبر.
جبهة الجبل الأحمر.
يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب يا الله
يا الله يا
يا رب يا الله الله أكبر.
ها سعد. اي وين اجى؟
الله أكبر. بس تعال شوف نشتغل بعضنا. تعال كان نشتغل تعال.
Is this not, in effect, our own state-supported terrorism?
And then Assistant Deputy Director of Operations. Now, what were these men doing? They were making millions of dollars selling CIA terrorist equipment expertise, and actually training Libyans, selling this equipment to Libya, and actually training terrorists in the Libyan China Lake terrorist training camp. Now, as the story is being squeezed out in bits and pieces, it's coming out. It's now been documented that there were active duty special forces officers helping them to train terrorists inside Libya. Now, we're talking about up until 78, 79. And there were also CIA active duty personnel at China Lake training terrorists. And this even boggles my mind, having been inside and from what I've seen. But
is this not, in effect, our own state-supported terrorism?
No. People fatigued of them in the United States. The problem is this. There are two kinds of covert actions, to oversimplify, basically. You see them clearly in Central America. Nicaragua, with a Contra Freedom Fighters destabilization force, and in El Salvador, where we spent $3.3 billion on the death squads to maintain the status quo.
To keep the revolutionary forces from winning.
To keep the people suppressed, to keep the oligarchies in power, to keep the dollars flowing, to keep the trade flowing at whatever price to the people. Now, if the Soviet Union proceeds to do what it's discussing publicly doing, it is openly saying that it's going to be cooperating with the United States, colluding with the United States to support, for the El Salvadors, if you will, to support the status quo. Which means there won't be anyone, a major superpower, supporting the people's interests and the people's aspirations and hopes. And the two superpowers will be colluding to have better trade to dominate the third world. This would be a great step in the direction of the world security state.
Is this not, in effect, our own state-supported terrorism?
No, and I'm glad you asked that question because I know it's on many people's minds. I have ordered an investigation. I know that the CIA is already going forward with one. We have a gentleman down in Nicaragua who is on contract. To the CIA, advising supposedly on military tactics.
Has been his policies.
Well, as a matter of fact, Kissinger published a paper, co-authored paper, which is discussed, I believe it's in the December issue of the Progressive magazine, in which he's saying how the U.S. Bush, who had just won the election, should prepare to fight wars in the third world. That the Soviet Union, mentioning specific weapons systems that had been designed to fight Soviets in Russia, in Europe, but how they could be reintegrated to fight wars in the third world.
Well, that's more aggressive than Kissinger's earlier posture.
No, he's flat saying that the next wars will be in the third world as we cooperate with the Soviet Union.
The Contras. And he drew up this manual.
it shows we have to reveal what's going on in these different CIA operations all over the world to try to publicize them, so hopefully people will be horrified if they know the truth of what's going on and the human consequences of these covert actions, and just simply shut down these secret wars.
Yes.
It was turned over to the agency head of the CIA in Nicaragua to be printed. And
we are dropping bombs on crowded cities at night where old people and children are sleeping. And we're watching it on CNN. And the only voice that's spoken up at all in this campaign about this is Ron Paul. Why are we so interventionist, he wants to know? What are we doing with all these wars? How are we safer? These are very common sense observations, and no other candidate can possibly speak those words. It would be, they believe, politically fatal.
a number of pages were excised by that agency head there, the man in charge, and he sent it on up here to CIA where more pages were excised before it was printed. But some way or other, there were 12 of the original copies that got out down there and were not submitted for this printing process by the CIA. Now, those are the details as we have them. And as soon as we have an investigation and find out where any blame lies for the few that did not get excised or changed, we certainly are going to do something about that. We'll take the proper action at the proper time.
Nous intervenons en Libye sur mandat du Conseil.
Today, we are intervening in Libya under a mandate from the UN Security Council alongside our partners, in particular our Arab partners. And we are doing this in order to protect the civilian population from the murderous madness of a regime that by killing its own people has lost all legitimacy.
And the American Secretary of State added her country's unequivocal support for the action.
Now, America has unique capabilities, and we will bring them to bear to help our European and Canadian allies and Arab partners stop further violence against civilians, including through the effective implementation of a no-fly zone.
More than 110 Tomahawk missiles launched from mostly U.S. ships and submarines pounded Libyan surface-to-air missile sites, aiming at more than 20 targets around Tripoli.
I was very interested to hear about Central America and our process down there, and I thought for a moment that instead of a debate, I was going to find Mr. Mondale in complete agreement with what we're doing, because the plan that he has outlined is the one we've been following for quite some time, including diplomatic processes throughout Central America and working closely with the Contadora group.
They come out of the blue.
I have 2 words for you. Predator drones. You will never see it coming.
Those are being operated by somebody at a command center in Langley, Virginia. They're watching it on a video screen. They're pressing the button. They're deciding who lives and who dies. And then they go off for a weekend where they have barbecues in their suburban Virginia and suburban Maryland homes. And who pays the price? The people who are the victims of the attack. Is there accountability? None whatsoever.
So I can only tell you about the manual that we're not in the habit of assigning guilt before there has been proper evidence produced and proof of that guilt. But if guilt is established, whoever is guilty, we will treat with that situation then, and they will be removed.
Drones have become the symbol of America's undeclared wars. Wars that seem to have no state or legal boundaries.
We've opened up a new realm of warfare, a new realm of breaching international and domestic law.
Used in Pakistan, Yemen, and elsewhere, they have killed scores of civilians. The former chief counterinsurgency strategist for the U.S. State Department has estimated that drone attacks kill 50 non-targeted persons for each intended target.
One of the things the United States kind of pretends is that we are morally superior. We are better able to judge what is good for other people. And therefore we are entitled to inflict our judgment on them, and that we presume they will be grateful to us for it. But that is not what happens, ever. And it's not what's happening in Yemen. It's not what's happening in Pakistan. They are furiously enraged with us.
Well, Mr. President, you are implying then that the CIA in Nicaragua is directing the Contras there. I'd also like to ask whether having the CIA investigate its own manual in such a sensitive area is not sort of like sending the fox into the chicken coop a second time.
I'm afraid I misspoke when I said a CIA head in Nicaragua. There's not someone there directing all of this activity. There are, as you know, CIA men stationed in other countries in the world and certainly in Central America. And so it was a man down there in that area that this was delivered to. And he recognized that what was in that manual was direct contravention of my own executive order in December of 1981, that we would have nothing to do with regard to political assassinations.
Oh my God! لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. علي. باهي. Standing here and burning their papers that they are throwing them around. We are not afraid from them. What they want to do, they just do. We are not afraid. They want to bump us. They just bump. We are the elite and we are not afraid from them. And now they are throwing to us their papers. But we don't care about any paper of it. We are just throwing them at the rubbish. So, shame on you, Natsu. That's what I'm going to say. Yes,